I'm kind of bummed that this is the last message in the series on Romans. And John, I really love that your message really emphasized personal transformation and mercy and community rather than focusing solely on, this is what I always learned, that it's about moral purity and self-denial and strict obedience. So that's kind of a shift for me. You mentioned how being like a living sacrifice often costs us, or does cost us. Tribalism, you talked about comfort, your pride. Can you share a practical example of what living sacrificially has looked like for you personally?
Yeah, anytime you think about Jesus and you think about the real world, there's a part of it where you're just like, okay, not that you're playing pretend, but it's like sometimes you don't feel like doing a lot of things, and so it's like I'm going to be a good dad today, and I'm tired and I am not really interested in this, or I'm gonna have a conversation with somebody who's really down and out and I don't really have time for their energy, so I'm gonna like try to put on my Jesus cosplay thing and like embody who he is, and it's gonna take me out of what I would like to do, and I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna listen to you, and then all of a sudden you start to like, oh man, this is actually, I feel myself like living in this level of purpose that I was intended for, even if it feels sacrificial at first. And so, I mean, I feel that all the time when there are things that I would much rather be doing that are self-serving, and it's not that it's bad to do things that you love and enjoy, but we live in the real world where we bump up against people and problems and so many things, and there are moments where God calls you into a thing, and sacrifice would be the word. A cost associated would be the feeling of engaging those things.
Yeah, because I feel like we're so cheap, as in like we maximize, we optimize how to live within our little pattern.
Yeah.
We want to keep, if you ever tripped on a pebble, a tiny pebble, and you tripped over it because our bodies have figured out how to walk with, if you go in slow motion and put a camera on it, with a clearance of almost nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
We know how to walk without much creating any kind of discomfort or clearance. And so I love that you called us to say, take a look. One of the things you talked about was the like how you turn into the driveway of the wrong
Different
thing.
parking spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so easy to just go along with this pattern that you've created, and
run the automation. Yeah.
And run the automation and go with it. So I really think Paul is calling us that. I want to agree with you on that like go and break that pattern, break that, and be different from the world. Not in a way that maybe we've, as church, sometimes, called us to, but go a different direction, a different speed, a different way. You double-clicked on Kendrick and
Drake.
And Drake.
Yeah.
What's one funny way that you've been like had to break a pattern where you're like, oh, I've got to transform how I do things. I got to get a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I love to argue, and I love debate. I love, a lot of what I watch on YouTube is like debate forums, and I can find myself getting like revved up to where the pattern is telling me, John, what's most important is to win. Over and over again, what's most important is to win, and that's not always the case. And so I have to pull myself out of that sort of pattern of thinking where whether it's a Kendrick and Drake beef and one person's rapping about this and trying to prove that this person's a worse person than
yes.
The idea is to win, and then that finds itself in my marriage, or that finds itself in the way I'm with my kids and trying to prove myself right, and then that finds itself in politics, and you're wrong, because there's just this pattern of thinking that like has its tentacles in everything else too.
Yeah.
And so that is something that I'm continually trying to break, and just maybe it's not winning, maybe it's listening. Practice listening.
And so that's for us personally. What about as a church group, as a church community?
Yeah.
What's one thing that we should try to break away from or be transformed in?
I mean, we've been practicing as a church this idea of community and getting ourselves out of our comfort zones with neighborhood church and this new rhythm of like, okay, we're going to go from this big thing that maybe my typical pattern is I come in, I park here, I sit here, I say, hi, I do the kind of hemming and hawing and I glad hand and, and it's a small talk and then I leave. And we're doing our best to break that pattern and go deeper into connection and community with one another, whether it's on the weekends or whether it's in neighborhood church. There's just this new rhythm of, no, I'm interested in your story and who you are. And I recognize that smaller spaces are important, and I recognize that maybe I'm going to enter into spaces that aren't as comfortable, where I am probably going to be seen and, my feet to the fire, like where I have to have engaging conversation that pull this other thing out of me, which is really loving and kind and reflects the heart of Jesus.
I love that you made that connection, and it helped us to use this message even to inform how we as a church go forward in our mission. And therefore, see what I did there?
Therefore.
Let me put a question right here on the screen that you can use to go a little further in exploring all these truths that John talked about, maybe God's will for your life, to accept this invitation that John so graciously extended to us earlier. We'll leave it up for a few minutes, and I want you to turn to someone and attempt to answer it, or answer it in the chat with others, or throw it in a group text to talk about it with friends, or write it at the top of the page for today's journal entry. So here's the question. What patterns of thinking or behaviors in your life need to be transformed in view of God's mercy? And what steps can you take to renew your mind this week? I'll see you then.